Okay, Chapter 1, Part 1, History and Themes. You need to know the history of psychology as well as the different themes of psychology. So I'm going to start a brief lecture of what you need to know. So, psychology and history and methods. So psychology, it's the scientific study of behavior and mental processes. It comes from the Greek terms of psyche and logos. Psyche meaning soul and logos meaning the study of a subject. It's the study of the soul or study of the mind. The roots of psychology come from philosophy and from the science of physiology. So, philosophy. For example, Aristotle from 384 to 322 BC questioned human nature, and he created empiricism, which means to seek knowledge through the senses. Then, the 19th century was a time of science, when physiology became big. Hermann von Helmholtz, from 1821 to 1894, he figured out / studied the brain and the nervous system as well as its function. Then the actual founder of psychology is thought of as William Wundt or Wilhelm Wundt. This founding of psychology came in the late 1800s, and he began the first psychology laboratory in Germany. He was the first to use scientific methods to explain basic psychological processes. Then you had structuralism. So, Titchener was a British student of Wundt, and began a psychology lab at Cornell. From this lab, structuralism began. So structuralism was the first major school of thought in psychology. Its goal was to understand the structure of the mind by breaking it down into mental experience, or consciousness, and into its basic elements of sensations, symbols, and feelings. Then there was also, with structuralism, came introspection, which was its method. It trained subjects exposed to a stimulus and then described their own mental experiences, such as discovering this introspection discovered the 4 basic tastes: salty, sweet, bitter, and sour. Then we had functionalism, created from William James, from 1842 to 1910. Now, James was a Harvard professor. He wrote the leading textbook of the time, Principles of Psychology. So we had the founder of psychology who created the first lab in Germany, and now we've got William James specifically, who created the first psychology textbook known as Principles of Psychology. So, each mental process has a purpose or a function to adapt to the environment and help the person survive. The mental activity or consciousness is a continuous process, a stream of consciousness, if you will. And this view completely disagreed with structuralists. Then there was the psychoanalytic approach from Freud, who was a Viennese physician. Psychoanalysis is the theory of personality based on unconscious causes of behavior. So unconscious conflicts are sexual or aggressive in nature. Childhood and other past experiences form our adult personalities and behaviors. Then was the behaviorism approach, which came about from John Watson, who was alive from 1878 to 1958. He rejected emphasis on the conscious and unconscious influences of behavior and stated that psychology is a purely objective, experimental branch of natural science. Its theoretical goal is the prediction and control of behavior. Then you had humanism and positive psychology. from Abraham Maslow, 1908 to 1970, and Carl Rogers from 1902 to 1987. It emphasized the potential for psychological growth and self-direction, as well as self-determination, free will, and choice in human behavior. In the late 1800s, science was entering a new paradigm called logical positivism. Now, a paradigm is a set of beliefs or assumptions that is shared by a group, in this case, scientists. And logical positivism is behavior that is governed by laws that exist independent of the observer. The laws can be studied objectively by carrying out experiments. So, steps in the scientific method. 1. Formulate a scientific question or a hypothesis. 2. Design an experiment to test your hypothesis. 3. Analyze your data using statistics. Accept or reject your hypothesis depending on the results, and then report your results through journal articles or scientific conferences. Now, a second scientific paradigm used by a different set of psychologists was constructivism. Constructivism was basically that our knowledge about behavior is built or constructed as part of human experience. There's no single truths that apply to everyone because every person's reality is different or relative to them. Relativism. The role of the scientists in constructivism is to observe and describe behavior rather than design experiments to test hypotheses. Now, a major theme of psychology is B equals F, P plus E plus P times E. Behavior is a function of things about the person, plus things about their environment, plus the interaction between P and E. Interaction is the effects of things about the person on their behavior, which depends on the environment they are in. So, the goals of psychology are to describe, explain, predict, and control behavior and mental processes, as well as using scientific methods to do this. So, descriptive methods observe and describe the behavior and identify factors associated with the behavior. Correlational methods show relationship among variables. Does knowing one predict the other? It allows prediction. Experimental methods show causation and explains behavior. Experimenter manipulates one variable and then measures the changes that occurred in the second variable. The descriptive research methods include naturalistic observation, case studies, and surveys. So, naturalistic observation is a recording naturally occurring behavior. It describes behavior as it occurs in the natural environment. Methods include counting, rating, cross-checking among observers, hidden observers, so not to affect behavior known as reactivity. Case studies are detailed description of a particular individual under study or treatment. It is a form of journal or diary and is usually an unusual situation. So, the case studies of Henry Molaison, who had a brain surgery to stop his epileptic seizures in 1950s, in which case they removed his hippocampus. And after having his hippocampus removed, he couldn't remember his past. Before the surgery he could, but afterwards he couldn't. So he could remember his past, so before surgery, but he couldn't really form new memories, which is how they figured out that the hippocampus is necessary to form new memories. Third is surveys, information gathered from people, including questionnaires, interviews, and opinion polls. Now, a population is the entire set of individuals. A sample is a group of people selected from the population. Your goal is to get a representative sample from a population. So, you have a sample, but the sample represents the whole population, if that makes any sense. So, this is just my brief summary of what you need to know for number 1. So, part 2 of chapter 1, brief summary, is going to be about correlation studies, experiments, and statistics. So, basically, remember, the 4 goals of psychology are to describe, explain, predict, and control, and we do this using the scientific method. Next, constructivism. Think of Bob the Builder, or constructing. You make and build your own experience. Then, logical positivism. Think of this as logic, laws, experiments. Humanism and positivism, it's all about psychological growth. You as a human have free will. You as a human are good and you can grow. It is up to you. Behavioralism is all about the behavior. It's all about scientific observation, scientific data, observing. It's all about the behavior, predicting and controlling behavior. Psychoanalytic approach is more so based off of case studies, and it's about personality and the unconscious causes of our behavior. Basically, our childhood past affects our adult present. Functionalism is the function of our conscious processes. Why is it happening? Structuralism is it uses introspection, and it's actually the structure of things. So breaking things down by their structures. Think of this as kind of like structuralism. When you think of the structure of an atom, you break it down. Electrons, neutrons, protons. Fuck. I'm sorry, I can't speak. Remember the founder and who created the first lab. Remember who created the first textbook. And just remember that psychology is a science. It is the scientific study of behavior and mental processes. And that is it for the Chapter 1 summary, Part 1.